Welcome to the first video in this series on better conversations. And when we think about conversations, they generally fall into two categories: conversations that are hard or conversations that are easy. And I want to tell you about a story that happened to me somewhat recently about a conversation that was hard. Last year, my family and I spent a week at the happiest place on earth, Disney. But our first day at the park, we all stood outside the gates to Magic Kingdom, looking at the visuals in the background in awe when my phone began to buzz. And I looked down, and it was my brother, and I answered. But immediately, I heard the sound of unmistakable dread in his voice. He was kind enough to be dog sitting for us, and I knew as soon as he said my name that it was bad news. He said, "Ty, your dog Lilo, isn't waking up." And here I was standing in front of what most people call the happiest place on earth, trying to prepare myself to share the news with both my wife and my kids. And I learned something that day about conversations. I learned that all of the best and worst days of my life involved hard conversations. They were conversations that I didn't want to have. They were conversations that were scary. They were conversations with people that scared me, or they were just conversations that seemed exhausting. And if I could get better at those conversations, whether expected or unexpected, I would not only help myself, but it could improve my connections with others, and it could lead to a more fulfilling life. I learned that then there are only three options for conversations. You can steer clear, you can run away from conversations, ignoring ones that could feel difficult or awkward. You could have those conversations but do it poorly. And I think we've all left conversations hoping that we had an opportunity for a do-over. Or we could do our best to improve our conversations. And that is what I want to spend the time talking about throughout these videos. So, what is a better conversation? It turns out better conversations have a couple of characteristics. They are both life affirming and they tie people together. These are conversations that grow connections. In our professional spaces, conversations work best when trust and respect and clear communication are cultural norms. And teachers are more comfortable sharing ideas, learning from each other when those foundations are met. Better conversations improve collaboration, meetings, PLCs, and conversations about teaching and learning. Better conversations lead to fewer bad feelings, and they lead to more listening, kindness, and candor. We all have different reasons why we want to get better at conversations. Even though we have different reasons to want to get better about conversations, whether professionally or personally, sometimes we have a difficult time realizing that there are actually different types of conversations. And the first type of these conversations are called top-down conversations. These are forms of communication where people perceive themselves as objects to be influenced or persuaded, or worse, manipulated, and it doesn't feel like we are always full partners in these types of conversations. We've all probably had at some point in our life, usually with a boss, there are conversations that sound like, do this thing, without an explanation, often without an opportunity to share your own thoughts or opinions, and you don't feel like there are a lot of listening. These are often very one-sided conversations. But to be honest, there's a time and place for top-down conversations. The other day, when my 9-year-old daughter decides to finger paint a mural all over our hallway at 5 o'clock in the morning on the first day of summer break, great opportunity for a top-down conversation. But in most other situations, we often jump to a top-down conversation when a partnership style of conversation would fit better. This other type of conversation, partnership, are the types of conversations where you position the person you're speaking with as a full partner rather than simply an audience for your opinions and your thoughts. These are the type of conversations we want to strive towards as we go through this series. Sometimes, though, there's concern when there's a shift in conversation style. What if I come off as fake? One of my good friends cannot stand watching Jimmy Fallon for this exact reason, because he can't stand how the late night host laughs at every one of the guest jokes, and he also thinks that it's inauthentic when he's really excited about absolutely everything. So the fear is, if I really start listening to my friends, if I start asking better questions, if I try and find common ground, won't I be written off as fake? But as we discuss better conversations throughout this series, you're going to notice something. If you're consistent in your beliefs, which is what you say, and you are consistent in your habits, which are what you do, and those two things match, you will be the most authentic version of yourself. And this journey into better conversation starts by figuring out first, what do I believe? And then secondly, how can I live my life in a way that is consistent with those beliefs? Another way to look at this is we start to have better conversations when our beliefs and our habits are in alignment, which means first we have to focus and understand what it is that we believe, and those beliefs shape who we are and form the basis for the habits that we have. However, if you think about habit science, we actually know that habits can either be good or bad. Habits such as asking good questions, sharing positive affirmations, not interrupting, those can all lead to better conversations. But habits such as talking too much, which I'm guilty of myself, taking too much credit, or jumping to negative assumptions can be damaging. So we want to do our best to build some good habits while simultaneously breaking our bad habits. And we can do this through some of what James Clear talks about in his book, Atomic Habits. So often we think about habits or goals or routines, and it's all about the milestones. We think about how much weight I want to lose, or how much money I can earn, or how successful I could be at X, Y, or Z. And it's all fixed on the finish line. But James Clear talks about this. Instead, if you could optimize for the starting line and you could make it as easy as possible to get started, often the outcome comes as a natural result. He says, if you could just get 1% better at something every day, like conversations, by the end of the year, you would have improved by almost 38% on a skill with very minimal investment. And you do this through the habits that you have. Humans, it turns out, do not rise to the level of our goals. Instead, we fall to the levels of our systems. So we want to make sure that we have systems in place that help carry our habits to the finish line, which means we can think about habits as small, repeatable steps that we can work towards each day, which has helped me immensely whenever I set out to learn a new skill, because you don't have to be perfect at it. There's that old saying that perfectionism is the enemy of progress. And when you think about habits like this, then every action we have turns into a vote for the type of person that you want to be. So if you want to be the person who has better conversations, your goal should not be to have all better conversations, but instead just more better conversations. An example of this might be that I'm casting a vote for the unhealthy version of myself every time I decide to eat a donut. But if I think about this as an election, I don't need 100% of the votes to win. I just need a majority, which means I don't need to be perfect. You are allowed to mess up. We just don't want to make messing up a habit. So if my goal is to clean up my classroom, then I could probably accomplish that goal pretty easily. But if I don't change my habit, my room is going to keep getting messy time and time again. So our goal in this series then is to reflect and become aware of your beliefs and identity so we can learn explicit habits and then practice those habits until they become tacit, which is embedded in our experience and it shows naturally in our interactions with people. So, you have some choices with how you go about practicing and reflecting in these habits and beliefs as we go through this series. I'm going to naturally ask you to practice some of the ideas we cover on your own, but if you're anything like me, sometimes I need accountability and sometimes I need partnership when I'm forming new habits, especially when I'm reflecting honestly on how they are going. For this reason, I'm going to encourage you to think about going through this practice with other stakeholders. Whether it is a partner you're going to practice conversations with, this could be a spouse, could be a friend, whether it is a team or other coworkers, or any other person who may help you as you form goals, model habits, and monitor progress you make along the way. Finally, this brings me to resources. In this series, we will be working alongside Jim Knight's book, Better Conversations, and the reflection guide that goes with it. So please, if you haven't, find a copy of this. It is a great resource. Looking ahead, the next video will cover the Better Conversations beliefs as a way to surface our current beliefs and maybe consider alternative beliefs that better describe who we are and who we want to be when it comes to having conversations with people.